Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're unpacking something that is so universally experienced, yet completely misunderstood by most people. Today, we're diving deep into the psychology of the chronic apologizer. Now, if you're someone who is constantly saying, "I'm sorry," society usually just paints that as a quirky habit, right? Or maybe just an extreme form of politeness. But it turns out chronic apologizing is actually this fascinating, highly complex window into how our brains adapt to survive. So let's unpack the real science of why this happens, because honestly, it is going to completely reframe a behavior we normally just write off as being a little too polite.
Okay, let's kick things off with a really honest question I want you to ask yourself. Do you apologize for things that are literally not your fault? I mean, think about your everyday life for a second. Have you ever caught yourself apologizing to a chair you just bumped into? Or what about when someone else bumps into you in the hallway and somehow the absolute first word out of your mouth is sorry? Maybe you find yourself apologizing just for taking up a little too much space in a conversation, or for asking a completely normal question at work. It feels completely automatic, doesn't it? We tend to just laugh it off, but if we dig a little deeper, psychology actually tells us an entirely different story.
So let's go ahead and destroy this myth right now. The story we've all been sold is that saying sorry all the time just means you're this really nice person who cares a lot about manners. But the reality? It is actually a profound psychological survival mechanism. Your brain literally wired itself to use the phrase, "I'm sorry," as a tool. But you might be wondering, a tool for what exactly? Like, what are you trying to survive in the middle of a totally normal Tuesday afternoon at the office?
Well, that brings us to an absolutely crucial concept in psychology known as the fawn response. Essentially, this is when you use preemptive apologizing as a survival mechanism to keep the peace, especially in unpredictable environments. And what's really fascinating here is the timeline. Notice how you aren't apologizing after you do something wrong. No, you're apologizing preemptively. You see, for kids who grew up in unpredictable or chaotic homes, they figured out very early on that they could de-escalate danger before it even started by fawning, basically by actively appeasing everyone around them. "I'm sorry" literally becomes this verbal shield to keep the peace before a conflict can even spark.
And this fawn response often stems from a really common trap that chronic apologizers fell into as kids: parentification. This happens when children are forced to manage the heavy, complex emotions of the adults around them way before they are developmentally ready for that kind of burden. If you grew up essentially having to be the household peacekeeper, solving problems that definitely were not yours to solve, your brain learned a very specific lesson. You learned that to stay safe and keep things calm, you had to completely suppress your own needs. If someone else was upset, you fundamentally believed it was your job to fix it. So in that kind of environment, "I'm sorry" became your absolute best go-to tool to maintain order.
Now, growing up that fast and constantly having to monitor the mood of the room takes a massive physical toll on you. It leads to what we call chronic stress adaptation. Because of your early environment, your nervous system is basically locked in a state of constant high alert. You might apologize constantly today because back then, things going wrong usually meant conflict or danger was right around the corner. So when you say sorry prematurely now, you are not being weak. Actually, scratch that. Viewing it as a weakness is a huge misconception. What's actually happening is your nervous system is just prioritizing psychological safety over your self-expression. Your body remembers that past mistakes meant danger, so it's constantly and automatically trying to neutralize threats.
Which leads us to this deeply ingrained internal monologue. I bet it sounds a little something like this. If I am being taken care of, someone else is being burdened. Wow. That is a profound, deep-seated belief created by carrying so much heavy responsibility so early on. It creates this overwhelming habit of just minimizing your own needs. If you constantly apologize for needing help, for asking a question, or honestly, just for existing in a room, it's because actually receiving care feels completely foreign and uncomfortable to you. You feel this immense guilt for resting or depending on anyone, so you just throw out a sorry to relieve that internal pressure of feeling like a burden.
But let's totally shift the perspective here for a second, because this isn't just about trauma. It is also about incredible brain power. We're talking about cognitive complexity. Believe it or not, chronic apologizing is often a hidden sign of really high intelligence. You aren't just some anxious overthinker. Your mind is naturally examining every single possible angle of a social situation in real time. You might say sorry because in a fraction of a second, your brain has already calculated 5 different ways your actions could have theoretically inconvenienced someone else. You are picking up on micro details most people would literally never notice. Now, while operating on this elite level of social awareness is definitely a sign of high intelligence, it is also, for sure, incredibly mentally exhausting.
So, the crucial point here is figuring out exactly where you get your sense of worth.
Psychologists call this an external locus of evaluation. Basically, it means you judge your own value based almost entirely on how other people react to you, rather than trusting your own internal standards. Because chronic apologizers often lack what's called self-concept clarity, they use the phrase, "I'm sorry," like a submarine pinging radar. It's this subconscious way to constantly check the temperature of the room and make sure they're still accepted by the group. You're just throwing out an apology to test the waters and ensure nobody is secretly mad at you.
And that constant checking in traps you in a very specific and, let's be real, exhausting dopamine loop. It goes like this. Step 1, you perceive a potential conflict. Maybe someone just sighs or shifts their weight in a chair. Step 2, you instantly issue a preemptive apology to smooth it over. Step 3, the other person inevitably goes, "Oh, it's okay, don't worry about it." And boom, step 4, you get a temporary hit of dopamine. You essentially become addicted to the variable reward of being told it's okay. It gives you this fleeting, temporary sense of security. But because it's only temporary, the whole loop just restarts the second the room gets quiet again.
To manage this never-ending loop, you develop what is known as guarded empathy. It's a pretty fascinating duality, actually. On one hand, you've sharpened your emotional awareness to this incredible, almost superhuman degree. You can sense microscopic shifts in a room's mood instantly. You anticipate problems long before they ever happen. But on the other hand, you're using those apologies to shield yourself and others from that potential conflict. It is a brilliant survival mechanism. It lets you be highly empathetic and care for people while simultaneously keeping your own true, vulnerable feelings safely hidden behind a very thick, very polite wall.
So, where does all this actually leave us? Well, it means recognizing a fundamental truth. Healing means learning you are allowed to rest and you are allowed to take up space. If you are someone who always says "I'm sorry," psychology does not call you broken. Not at all. You are perfectly adapted. Your nervous system simply adapted to intense pressure early in your life. You had to learn responsibility before you ever learned safety. You learned strength before you were ever allowed to be soft. Healing doesn't mean you have to stop being a kind, deeply empathetic person. It simply means recognizing that you no longer need anyone's permission to take up space in this world.
The human mind is just an incredibly resourceful, protective machine, and your apologies, they're just one tiny piece of the puzzle. Which leaves us with one final, pretty fascinating question to wrap up our explainer today. What else is your mind hiding? I mean, if a simple "I'm sorry" has this much deep psychological machinery running behind the scenes, just imagine what else is driving your daily habits. If you want to uncover the hidden psychology behind your own personality and behaviors, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We are going to keep peeling back the layers in future explainers, and you definitely won't want to miss what we discover next. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you next time.